Maranatha, and welcome to Septuagint versus Masoretic, the channel where we look at the Septuagint, which is the scriptures, the version of the Bible that existed before Jesus Christ arrived, around 300 years before his arrival. The Bible the disciples and the early church used, versus the Masoretic text, which came after Jesus Christ had already died and was resurrected. I think around 300 years after, and was not fully complete and produced until 1,000 years after. Uh, so that's what we do in this channel. And today we're looking at Deuteronomy chapter 11. There are 32 verses in this chapter. The first difference we notice is in verse 1. Significant difference here. It says, observe his appointments versus keep his charge. His appointments seems to be expressing the holy days, the moedim, our appointments, versus a redundancy here. Keep his commandments, keep his charge. It's the same thing. Not so in the Septuagint. Verse 2, you shall know this day, versus you know, and you know. No, they don't know it yet. They will know, according to the Septuagint. Continuing on, wonderful works versus greatness. So we see the difference here is the actions versus the vague character trait of just greatness. Verse 3, wonders versus acts. Verse 4, overwhelm the face of them versus overflow them. You can overflow them with water. Yeah, that makes sense. But overwhelm the face of them might mean something a little different, although probably is not wildly different. We have two omissions in both verses 5 and 6, talking about all the things. Verse 7, skipping to verse 8, actually, says here, as many as I command you, versus um, all the commandments. Big difference as well in the same verse, verse 8, that you may live and be multiplied, versus that you may be strong. So it's one thing to just be strong, but it's another thing altogether to be able to live and be multiplied. Talking about your future generations and being able to reproduce, which is a blessing in and of itself to be given children. Okay, an omission in the same verse as across Jordan was omitted. So it's not as specific as to the geographic location here. And in verse 9, we see an omission of after them, their seed after them. Verse 10, whensoever they sow the seed, versus where you sowed your seed. It's not where, it's when they will. Verse 11, mountains and plains versus hills and valleys. We continue here, shall drink versus drinks. Verse 12, an addition of the word always upon it. Well, one is saying it's permanently upon it, versus, just is upon it. Verse 13, now, if you will indeed, versus, and it shall come to pass. So one is saying, if you do this, which is a big, determining whether you will or not, versus and it shall come to pass. So one is saying this will happen versus it depends on you, depends on your choice, what you decide to do. Okay. Verse 14, a continuous difference here. Then he, meaning Yah, Elohim, versus that I, talking about uh, Moses. So I will give you the rain of your land. So this is Yah speaking in the Masoretic, but it's Moses narrating what will happen. He's the one speaking in the Septuagint. Verse 15, and when you have eaten and are full, versus that you may eat and be full. So again, this is another determiner. It's undetermined. Depends on what you do, what you decide. But it says here, and when you have eaten. So it's more certain that this will happen. This will happen versus this is a possibility, not a guarantee, but not so in the Septuagint. Verse 16, this verse makes a lot less sense in the Masoretic. So let's read it. Take heed to yourselves that your heart be not deceived, and you turn aside and serve other Elohim and worship them. So I will give you your rain. And then he's talking about I will send grass that you may eat and be full. And then he's saying, take heed to yourselves that your heart be not deceived, and you turn aside and serve other Elohim and worship them. So why does this not make sense? Here it says in the Septuagint, he will do this for you. He will give to your land. He'll give food, and take heed to yourselves that your heart be not puffed up. Okay, it makes more sense because it's saying here, when you have eaten and are full, that's when you should take heed to yourself that your heart be not puffed up, and you transgress and serve other gods and worship them. So you're doing these things, being puffed up and seeking or transgressing and serving other Elohim and worshiping them because you are in a good state. You're free from trouble, for instance, in this case, free from starvation. So they have eaten and are full. That's when the temptation arises that you would trust in your own power. You would be less reliant on Elohim to provide and sustain for you. And you think, oh, my hand brought this to me. My strength, my abilities are feeding me and I'm providing for myself. No, that's not what is happening here. That's not the case. But in the Masoretic, it's saying, I will send grass that you may eat and be full. And then it's just saying out of nowhere, take heed to yourselves that your heart be not deceived. So why would your heart be deceived? There's nothing saying, um, nothing leading you to that. There's no emotion. There's no cause and effect here. In the Septuagint, there's a cause and effect. Because you've eaten and are full, that's going to lead you to feeling this way. But here it's just saying, just watch out because your hearts are deceptive. You're susceptible to being tricked, and that's not what's happening here. So I think that's the biggest difference we've seen so far in this chapter. That your heart, I should say, when you've eaten and are full, that leads you to being puffed up. So the temptation is there when you've eaten and are full. Okay, so that's probably what the title of this video is. When you have eaten and are full, take heed to yourself. Cause and effect. It says puffed up versus deceived. So that's another difference. If your heart is deceived, then you have been deceived. But if you are puffed up, you are simply, you're more arrogant, you're more self-reliant, self-confident. And that's not good. Transgress versus turn aside. And verse 17, you shall perish quickly versus unless you perish. So one is a guarantee. This will happen versus this is a possibility. This might happen. to you. If you serve other Elohim and worship them, this will happen to you. It's not that Yah's Elohim is arbitrary, just going to do a random thing. No, when you break the law, there's going to be a swift uh, punishment, although he can be merciful as well. So it depends. But in this case, they will be, you shall perish quickly when you do all these things. You transgress. I mean, it's not one action. It seems to be a pattern, a habit, pattern of behavior, and perpetual just rebellion in this case. Verse 18, store versus lay up. You shall store versus lay up. Okay. And an addition of my words, these my words, talking about these words. So again, it's Moses talking to them, not Elohim talking to them, because he did talk to them before Exodus 20, and they said, "Stop talking to us." So that's why Moses is speaking. And an omission here, you shall. The word "shall" was omitted. You shall bind. It shall be fixed before your eyes, versus may be as frontlets between your eyes. So it's one thing to have it in between your eyes. It's another thing altogether that they would be fixed before your eyes. So you are putting them somewhere visible, prominent, that you will see these words. So, for instance, there's something called the mezuzah. They put it on the doorposts and even sometimes on top of the door itself, on the lintel, and they'll have the words, whichever words they are, whether it's the Shema or specific commandment or commandments. And those are reminders for us to follow the law, the Torah, and remind us who we are and the standards we have, standards of behavior and morality. Okay, next we have here verse 19, thee versus thine. When you sit in the house, so it could be anyone's house. It's open to that interpretation versus it has to be your own house. So if it's not your house, don't talk about these things, don't teach these things, is what the Masoretic is saying, but not so. Wherever you are traveling, wherever, if you're a visitor or a guest and you're staying at someone's house, maybe you could, perhaps you should be sharing these commandments, these ways, this way of life, and even the gospel. Verse 22, omit, there's an omission, and it shall come to pass. Again, these are going to happen. It's not about a question of if, it's they will happen. Another omission here is cleave close to him. So it's not just cleave to him, but you're cleaving close to him. That is a very close relationship that we're supposed to have with him. And to rely on him, like as if your life depended on it. That's what I'm picturing here. Verse 24, continuous difference of anti-Libanus, which are, if I remember correctly, the mountains of Lebanon. It's not all of Lebanon. It's an area, specific area of Lebanon, versus just Lebanon. Just give us the whole country. That's not what they're saying here. It's anti-Libanus. It's a specific area that is part of the mountains of Lebanon, the mountainous region, but not all of Lebanon. Okay, and then West Sea versus the uttermost sea. Verse 25, no one shall stand versus be able to stand. An addition of be able to stand. Okay. An omission, face of all the land. It says on the face of all the land. That was omitted. And 26, continuous difference. And a significant difference as well, saying, which is an omission, the. So just the word the, blessing, and the curse. So it's not just a vague or general, it's not your run-of-the-mill blessing or and curse. They are the blessing and the curse. And So these are important. You'll get the blessing or the curse. I believe this is where where Yah is telling them about he presents life and death before them. But I'll just keep reading here. 27, an omission of all. Verse 28, wander versus turn aside. You wander versus turn aside. And then having gone versus to go. So one is past tense, completed, one is future. And then verse 29, then you shall put blessing versus that you shall put the blessing. So it shall come to pass when Yah has brought you to the land that you shall. Okay, that you shall do this. But here it's saying the Septuagint shall come to pass. Yah has brought you into the land. You shall put the blessing. Then you, okay, so then you'll do that then. So it's more specific as to the time frame. Verse 30, an omission of the word lo. So look, instructing the whoever is being spoken to look. I think it's Israel. It says lies westward versus in the champaign, which is a plain or field. So one is talking about a direction, one is talking about a specific kind of environment. The high oak versus the plains of More. So it's a specific tree versus plains, a field. Verse 31, you are passing versus you shall pass. Again, present versus future. And it says here, gives you to inherit always versus gives you and you shall possess and dwell in it. Okay, actually, I noticed always has been omitted as well. So so one is connected. Let me just put your omit of always. That's important. It says here, Yah gives you to inherit always. You're passing over Jordan to go in and inherit the land which Yah or Elohim gives you to inherit always. So you're going over in order to go into the land which Yah gives you to inherit always. So it's connected. Versus you shall pass over Jordan to go in to possess the land which Yah your Elohim gives you, and you shall possess it. So you can see the punctuation really makes these two very different verses. It reads differently, a lot differently. So these are two different separate actions in the Masoretic, saying you shall pass over to go in to possess the land, and you shall possess it and dwell in it. Here it's saying in the Septuagint, you're passing over to go into it, which Yah, our Elohim gives you. He gives you to inherit. So he gives it to you to inherit. It's not just giving it to you and then you will possess it. No, these are connected actions. Verse 32, his versus thee. So again, these are Yah's ordinances versus thee. All the statutes which I set before you, which some people could read to mean these are Moses's laws. No, these are Yah's ordinances. Simply, Moses is being used as an instrument, a spokesman, because they didn't want Yah to speak to them anymore out of fear. An omission as well is our last item here. Omission of as many, as I said before you today. So that's all for today. Thank you very much for your time. Do tune in next time. We'll look at Deuteronomy chapter 12. Until next time, may Yah bless you and make your way prosperous. Maranatha, friends.